Hey YouTube, this is Ace of Spades here teaching how to fix the leaky carburetor. So here's the carburetor. If you're experiencing the problem, it's going to be right here. Leaking fuel in between the motor block and the carburetor. So what we're going to want to do is drain the fuel, but before that let's get a quick parts list of what we're going to need. We're going to need an 8mm wrench, a tube to put the fuel, and a can to put the fuel in. Also going to need a rag, wipe your hands, whatnot, and toothpicks to clean off the carburetor once we get it off. So let's start by draining the fuel. Okay, what you're going to do is take the gas lid off so you can have an air release so it doesn't take a while. So what you're going to do, take this little choke thing off and get your tube ready with your container. Now this can get a little messy, so just be careful. Oh, and don't forget to turn your fuel off. And don't get fuel everywhere because it's really hard to clean up. So in one swift motion, take off the fuel line and aim the stream into the bucket. Okay, just wrench, take these little bolts off. Now you're going to want to keep these somewhere where you don't lose them. I mean, you probably could replace it, but coming from me, I'm always losing and misplacing things, so just be better if you put them somewhere. Okay, so just slide this off. Make sure you don't lose this gasket either. Okay, now this is a little tricky part. Slide this forward with your finger while pushing this forward and just wriggle it around until you dislodge that, like so. Spring. Okay, now use this. Use your carburetor. Now, be careful. There still is fuel in the bowl, so what you want to do is get this screw. It's 10mm. Just get a wrench, or you can get a Phillips head to take this off. I made the mistake of getting it on so tight the first time I took it off that no matter how hard I try or anybody else, I can't get it off. So if that happens, don't worry. Just dump it upside down and it'll come out the intake, but it is quite messy and you get fuel everywhere. But just make sure you get this off and drain it into the into your container. Go ahead and take this off too, put it so it's easier to work with. Okay, here's your carburetor, taking it off. So forgot to mention, you're going to need a 10mm wrench to take the bowl off. So just loosen it up. Take the bowl off. Put this aside. It may have some sediments in there since the fuel is not filtered. You might want to just wipe that out. Okay, see how we have it turned upside down? This is where you're going to determine whether it needs to be fixed or not. You want to have a 180-degree plane, just flat. If you're looking at it like this view and it's not, that's because it's meant to be this way and the fuel comes up and opens, closed, open, closed, because it floats. But determine if it's just flat. So, you take this pin, slide it across, take this pin out. You do not want to lose it, because I don't know where you get another one of those. Take this off carefully and set it to the side. Now, this little gold ring, we don't have a zoom because it's blurry, but this little gold ring is where your trouble is going to be. First of all, let me explain what happens. This sits in here like so. Has a spring on it to give it some buffer to bring it back up, but you want to have this spring, you want to have about, say about a millimeter of not spring showing. I don't know if that makes any sense. because you're gonna bring the toothpick. You don't wanna pick around in there too much because there's gaskets and such. But you wanna just look down there, and if there's like any crud, any like sticks or anything, you just wanna slowly get it out. Maybe blow in there, but you don't really want to pick around in there too much because there are little rings in there, and you don't want to mess it up because those are hard to find. Another thing, this round gasket here, do not take it out, because once you take it out, if you just bend it slightly, it'll be out of whack and you cannot fit it back in. And if you don't, this fuel will slosh out of the bowl once you shake it around if you're on bumpy terrain, and it just isn't good. So once you have that all out, make sure you have this mechanism back and just slide it on there like so. Get your pin and just slide it back in, and you should have the 180-degree plane flat all over. You don't really want to mess around in here too much unless you know what you're doing, which I probably don't know what I'm doing, but it's kind of a touchy thing with all the gaskets, and that's enough. So when you put your bowl on, see how it's like got all this where the screw is? You want to put this towards the back so it doesn't hinder float movement. Or otherwise, just put the screw where you have the choke lever. Easy enough. So, here's your carburetor. You want to put the throttle mechanism, and you want to make sure you have this one vertical and this side horizontal. So just put it straight up and wedge it in there, just like so. And get the spring in there. Then just put it on. Make sure you have your gasket in place. Go ahead, wait. Put it. Jiggle it in there. You're gonna have to work around with it, and then push it in there and slide it there. Put your spring mechanism, and it should rest like that. Put your fuel, and now in this stage, here's how you determine without too much hassle to get it back off if you have it fixed. You should put a little bit of fuel into the fuel tank, and then turn on your fuel inlet. Now you might think, oh my gosh, it's loose, so fuel's just gonna gush out, whether it's fixed or not. That's not the case. The fuel should only be going out of the carburetor unless told to by the throttle and putting fuel into there. So if it's not fixed, you're gonna have fuel spilling out. If it's fixed, no fuel should come out. So what you want to do is put this back on. Make sure you have the gasket on. I pretty much destroyed this one. Now, you're not going for an airtight seal in here because you need to have an air vent. So, when you put the screws back on, or the nuts back onto the bolts, don't crank down on them so hard, because they're just going to mess up everything, and I pretty much cranked down it when I didn't know. So just get a little until it's hard. So you're not getting that much resistance, or you want some resistance, but not that much. So everything's back on. You got the throttle. My spring is messed up. Gotta put that back on. So you just put your fuel in. Make sure you get the cover on. Put the fuel, and you should be good. This is Ace of Spades here, signing off.